Joining us now to discuss this even further is Elizabeth Ricci. She is an immigration attorney. Elizabeth, good to see you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we got a good breakdown within that report, both sides of this, the judge saying that if we were to go forward with what the Trump administration is demanding when it comes to these speedy deportations, it's something that could really start to impact not just people who are in the country like immigrants, but really everybody as a whole. The federal government, though, pushing back, saying that it is legal what they're doing. They have the authority to do so. So, Elizabeth, really, who wins in this case?
Well, that's a great question. So right now, everybody's losing, and that includes you and me and your viewers who are U.S. citizens, because the concern is that if we deny due process to one group, we deny it to another group. The case you're talking about is called Matter of Q. Lee, and under that case, as of recently, people who have been in the United States, we had a case a few weeks ago. She had been here for 18 years, was considered an arriving alien and denied bond. So now that has been recognized as a misapplication of law. And now we're going back to the traditional, you have to have only entered within the last 14 days and be basically at the border to have that application. Otherwise, you're entitled to a bond hearing. And that has ramifications, like I said, for all of us.
And so, Elizabeth, this is not something, when we talk about this a lot in the past, it's unprecedented times. What can we glean from this latest action from the Trump administration? Immigration is something that they're really focused on, so they're not just going to let it go. What would be the next steps?
Well, the next steps are to follow precedent, follow the law. Of course, the president has wide discretion over immigration, but that discretion has limitations, and we have to enforce the law and respect the Constitution. So as long as that can happen, the president and the administration are certainly in a position to enforce immigration law and make additional limitations on who enters the country. That's not the question. The question is, whether we're doing it within the law or not. And hopefully going forward, that's going to be the case.
I want to talk a little bit more about the crackdown from across the country. And crackdown is such an interesting way to put it. But we're kind of honing in on immigration. So I'm bringing us to this live image that we have over at Chicago. That is the famous Chicago beam there. So the mayor there, Brandon Johnson, really pushing back against the National Guard troops being deployed down there to the city to help with immigration efforts. This is something that the Trump administration has been pushing, not just in Chicago, but we've heard for places like New York, Los Angeles, we saw from over the summer. What can the mayor do at this time? What is the appropriate plan for him to take if he doesn't want that federal control down there when it comes to immigration?
The mayor can limit 287G engagements with the federal government so that there is not a cooperation between local law enforcement and the feds. He can start some educational programs to inform people of their rights. For example, he can make sure that people know that ICE has to have a warrant to come into your home or into your business if it is behind closed doors and not in a public type establishment. So there are efforts he can make, because if this proceeds on the 5th of September as planned, it's going to look a lot like what we saw in Los Angeles. And I think we will see violence, and we will see the militarization of local law enforcement, which is on his wallet, and that's going to cost local taxpayers money to do that. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to be very interesting how local agencies are targeted and their resources are used to carry out federal law.
Chicago's mayor, he has also blocked police from wearing face coverings to hide their identities, as most federal immigration and customs enforcement officers, they have adopted that strategy since President Trump took office. What do we know regarding that? Let's say that there is an ICE raid in a city, in a town down there. How do these agents have to identify themselves? Do they have to in any regard? What about people that are kind of scared and they don't know if it's a legit thing and what's going to happen to them?
Well, that's the concern, right? And we've seen people being copycats and pretending to be law enforcement who were not. So traditionally, law enforcement did not have total face coverings. They had gear that identified themselves as members of law enforcement. And that's the goal. So people know who they are dealing with and that it's not a kidnapping, for example. So I can see that the mayor in Chicago and in other places, they are trying to encourage people to not just know their rights, but know that agents need a warrant. Agents should identify themselves as law enforcement. They do carry badges, and they can't just come into your home or come into your business and take you away without telling you who they are or why they're doing that. And again, that's all part of due process that you and I and your viewers as American citizens are all entitled to.
I guess like digging a little bit deeper into that answer that you just gave. I mean, what were to happen though? Are you allowed to push back against an agent that say that you don't want to be taken into custody because you are concerned, because you are scared, or it's one of these things where no, you would have to go along with it because federally this is what's being allowed under the law?
Well, it depends, right? So if there's an agent at your door with a warrant, you have to let them in. There's no question there. But if they are at your workplace and it's behind the counter, then it's different. Do they have a warrant? You should inspect that warrant. So it's not like you can go along with it or not. You don't necessarily have that right. But you do have the right to inspect the warrant, make sure that it applies to you in that particular premises so that you're not going with somebody who's not indeed a law enforcement officer.
All right, Elizabeth. And then I do want to touch on another major headline from last week, almost a week ago. It was last Monday that you were on with me live as we saw what happened to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I want to put up some footage here of Abrego Garcia. Now, his case really making national headlines. Last Monday, he was ordered to appear at the immigration offices there in Baltimore, Maryland, supposedly just for a hearing, just for a check-in. He was detained on the spot and taken into custody. Well, right now he has requested for asylum in the United States. And I was reading some of the reporting here. Legal analysts, Elizabeth, are saying that this could put an end to the whole ordeal, his request for asylum, but it's also a risky move. Why is that?
Well, it's interesting because now he's requesting asylum, but not for what you would expect for El Salvador, for Uganda, where he may be deported to. So he's requesting asylum based on fear of future persecution if he were to go there. One thing that's really interesting about this Uganda possibility is Uganda has specifically said they're not going to take criminals. He has no criminal history, but the administration insists that he is a criminal. So if he has a criminal history, he can't go to Uganda. He has declined the offer to go to Costa Rica in exchange for pleading guilty to charges that he will face in January. He, through his attorneys, has filed a gag order against the Attorney General as well as the Secretary of Homeland Security for what they're calling baseless claims, because they continue to say to the media that he has a criminal history, that he's a predator, that he's an abuser, a smuggler. He has no criminal history whatsoever. So now we're adding one additional case to this. He'll have an asylum claim pending. He's got an evidentiary hearing scheduled for October, which won't be ruled on for another month. So he'll be here at least through November. And then, of course, he's got this deportation challenge going on with Uganda and Costa Rica. So it's one more case in this man's portfolio that has become very, very high profile after the United States agreed that his initial removal was a mistake. And he did not get asylum initially. He received what's called withholding of removal, which is similar to asylum, but not the same. The immigration judge had previously ruled that he could not be deported to El Salvador because he would face persecution because he had been attempted to be recruited by gangs there. He has not been found to be a gang member in the United States. So he did not receive asylum previously, I believe, because there were some procedural issues. He hadn't made that request timely, but now he's going to request it on another basis for a different country.
All right, Elizabeth. So we touched on a lot of immigration headlines during this one conversation here. There's a lot more to get to, of course, as always. Is there anything that you feel that you want to add before I let you go, though? Maybe one case that we didn't discuss during this conversation, or something that our viewers should keep in mind as we continue to follow all of this going forward?
Sure. So about 100 immigration judges have either been terminated or resigned since January. And this causes a problem because we have about 3.5 million immigration court cases pending right now. Traditionally, an immigration judge needed to have 10 years of experience in immigration, be a prosecutor for immigration, or an appellate judge for immigration. And as of this week, there's a new rule that to be an immigration judge, you do not need any immigration experience whatsoever. So that creates some concerns about putting speed over justice and create some concerns about the quality of decisions that are going to be coming out. Immigration law is, according to some studies, more complex than tax law. So it's going to be very interesting to see how judges who don't have experience in immigration are deciding some very complex cases like the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Elizabeth Ricci, immigration attorney, we always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox to break down these ever so complicated cases that we continue to follow. And of course, we'll check in soon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.